Chapter 1.
At university, halfway through a term, you get a reading week. It is called this because the lecturer in science importance reads the tea leaves, discerns that they're hash leaves, and predicts that neither the students or the faculty will be in a fit state to learn anything. She then gives everybody the week off. Calling it DOS week would be more accurate, but it wouldn't do as much to justify the university's enormous fees. I'm doubly affected by the Great DOS Week migration because it sends students as far afield as their family homes and sunny places with duty-free. Meanwhile, I'm brassic, and my parents died shortly before I was donated like unwanted bric-a-brac to the convent of Bene Conversitae Puellae et Verbera. Complaining about my situation to Professor Lovecraft, the only person on campus who'd listen, though often with his eyes shut, had not garnered me any sympathy. Being some sort of alien, I'm not sure he grasps the concept. He certainly doesn't care to.
I don't know why you're complaining.
He told me.
I've had some great times on the town with nuns.
Professor, did any of those nuns wear a PVC habit with an L plate on the front? He looked back happily on distant times and said,
Well, it doesn't matter. You could still learn a lot from them.
I remember the lessons on flagellation well enough.
Then they were effective lessons. Do you remember my lesson on white dwarves?
You know full well I didn't turn up for... I was ill that day. Something triggered in his professorial brain.
It's the middle of October. DOS reading week's not for another 2 weeks.
I know, but I need to make plans.
Well, you could. Maybe not.
What?
You could use the transporter.
Uh-oh. That thing rearranged atoms as carefully as the Enola Gay.
Jump through time to the end of reading week and find out what you did. If you didn't enjoy it, come back and do something else.
On the other hand, without Enola, OMD would never have released the Milky Bar song. Free time is precious when you're a student, and I didn't want to waste mine. I was tempted with one reservation. Wouldn't that create a paradox that unravelled the universe?
Yes, but not our universe.
30 seconds later, we were crowding around the transporter's instruction leaflet and wishing we could read Korean.
Okay,
he said.
I think if you press this button when you're done, it'll bring you right back to me.
30 seconds after that, the laws of time and space meant about as much as the no smoking sign on the bike sheds. And when I reached my destination, I realised immediately the professor had made a terrible mistake. I was staring into the malevolent fanged grin of a velociraptor.
I hope she survives long enough for me to be in it again. I so enjoy those bits. Let's find out in Chapter 2.
Pooey, it said. You smell of poo. An older raptor, likely a parent, inched close, but only until I'd flinched away again. You'll have to forgive little Timmy. His poopy smells of humans because he eats a lot of humans. She looked me up and down, her expression as confused as my own. What species are you? Before I could answer, another raptor wearing a red polo shirt appeared, announcing cheerfully,
Welcome to Anthropocene Park.
It was only when it suddenly started rattling forward and dumped me back into a hard plastic seat that I realised I was in a fiberglass buggy, part of a train. Looking back, the vaguely simian face painted on the front of the carriages looked like it was wearing too much eye makeup, had long dark hair, and in its vacant plastic expression was something oddly familiar. The train rattled and clunked, slowly rolling by a series of dioramas narrated by the thoughtful-sounding red shirt. As we rolled perilously close to a group of teenagers passing a cigarette around, Dino Timmy asked, They're not real, are they? With a hint of fear in his voice. Animatronics, his mum said, putting a comforting arm around him anyway. As I watched the exhibits in the display with their limited repertoire of jerky, clumsy movements, I wasn't so sure.
It's hard to believe,
the red-shirted tour guide was saying,
that just 16 million years ago, beings such as these ruled the Earth. The latest research suggests they even had a basic system of language.
From hidden speakers, I could hear the repetition of in it. The erratic nature of the ride proved too much for one of my fellow passengers. A yellowy raptor filled his sick bag.
Researchers even believe that the healthy natural oil that powers our trucks and cars may have come from the paws of humans such as these.
The humans in question offered us an in it. Our route took us under a picture of the professor's face and a sign that read, The happiest place on earth. We flapped through rubbery awnings and out into the open air, continuing on over a number of large enclosures filled with various animals. Some were even human.
The mating rituals of these creatures is truly foul, but thanks to the copious digital records they left, our scientists were able to determine that the females prized stepfathers and stepbrothers as their mates.
Little Timmy was making his 2 dolls do something to each other that left me feeling queasy, and apparently I wasn't the only one. The red shirt himself made some apologies and honked loudly into a logoed sick bag. Timmy joined in, then his mum too, and more until I was the only one holding an unused bag.
I'm sorry.
Red shirt muttered.
I only normally get this way around humans.
Me too.
Someone muttered from the front row.
But these are all behind this safety glass.
Timmy's mum, and honestly I had no idea a velociraptor could do this, she looked at me accusingly, and one by one all the sickly watering eyes were fixed on me like I was somehow responsible. It's probably motion sickness, I suggested, quite reasonably I felt. It wasn't accepted that way. Throw her in with the other animals, someone suggested. When a dinosaur says that about you, it carries a little bit more weight than, for example, a TV executive sending you into the Big Brother house. And because by now the monorail was travelling slowly above a number of zoological displays and pens, there were all sorts of reasons to protest. Can I chew it, Mummy? Of course not. It's not clean. The cheek of it. Escape routes seemed in desperately short supply. I'm not human, I insisted, spinning left and right to swat off their grasping hands, well, claws. I'm totally a great ape. Look. It was not a convincing performance or an effective protest, but I didn't have time to ponder the consequences of it ending up on YouTube because angry dinosaurs closed around me. Even though I was kicking out and a poorly aimed Doc Martin could do a lot of damage, my struggles achieved little. The car was too narrow, the dinosaurs too many, too fast, too strong. I kicked, punched, I even bit, but soon I had hands on my extremities and was swinging back and forth as they prepared to pitch me out. Left, a dizzying sway revealed trees and concrete walls, crowds moving around them. A polar bear eyed me sleepily, hoping for a speedy delivery, no doubt. Right, lake land scattered with brown water and a few wading birds looking up at us. If I had their wings, I wouldn't be half as worried as they looked. Wait, I cried. Take me to Professor Lovecraft. I really was that desperate.
Who?
The host asked. Sexton Lovecraft, the guy that owns the park. His picture is above the gate, see? Take me to him, please.
Oh, sure,
he said, and they tossed me over the side.
That professor certainly sounds like I'm the helpful type. She'll be in good hands during Chapter 3.
The heron squawked some choice words about my evolution and parentage as they dodged out of my flight path. The lake remained stoic and unmoved, as lakes tend to, and greeted me with a cold, hard slap. Luckily, it broke my fall. Unluckily, it felt like it broke all of my bones in the process. Spitting swamp water that contained enough mosquitoes for me to open my own park, I scrambled for the shallows, bracken and slop pouring in and out of my clothes. Luckily, the lake was barely deep enough to drown in because swimming remains an arcane mystery to me. I was crawling to the edge, my top bunching under my armpits, when a clumsy hand dragged me the rest of the way by my bra strap. I was not grateful, not just because of the pain, what was one amongst many, but because it's demeaning being carried like luggage, and because my porter was amazingly hirsute and smelt like a damp dog. I regretted telling the dino throwers that I was a great ape when I was this close to one. As he dragged me into a circle of his peers, I began my protests with, "Get your damn dirty," and ended with recognition. And Professor Lovecraft?
Malcolm?
It's Riley, Pillock.
I had no idea your surname was Pillock. No wonder you keep it a secret.
I'm Riley, you're a Pillock. He shrugged. And I didn't doubt he'd been called worse because I'd called him worse myself. He was rarely fazed by any of it. He hooked a twig out of my hair, and if he thought it marked a new phase in our relationship, 4 words put that right.
Full coverage today? Shame.
Somewhere along the lake, I'd picked up more leaves and twigs, and I could tell he was eyeing them up, so I reset my top to keep them from his eyes. The tribe, if it counted as such a thing, was loosely arranged in a group. Movement was rare unless precipitated by a bug bite, and grooming was clearly rarer still. They were all matted lumps of body hair woven together with odours I didn't want to recognise. Professor, what are you doing here? Your picture was above the gate, so I thought you owned the park.
I do, or maybe I did.
Then why are you living in a swamp? He shrugged.
It's great here. They throw free grub, occasionally D-phones, and once in a while, a whole flaming car full of screaming dinosaurs. All they ask in return is to watch us mate.
Gross!
No, it's pretty good, isn't it? And you know it's time to start when the 3 o'clock train starts playing Fabio's greatest hit.
I sized my shaggy professor up from his brown toenails to his gloopy, infested hair, and I knew that whatever the cost, I had to get out of there before 3. Guys, I addressed the wider group, humans aren't supposed to live like this. We have to be free to innovate and build, to reach for the stars.
Golly, this is a rousing speech, innit?
But the professor, who remained otherwise unroused, was the only one listening. Why don't you have a teepee or a fire going? It's unnatural, I said. Someone replied, it's those things that are natural, innit? Innit? They chanted as a group. How can heat and shelter be unnatural?
Fire's pollution, innit?
Innit?
And you kill an animal for its skin just to shelter you? Selfish, innit?
I tried to resolve the words that I'd heard with the hairy shape in front of me. Karen?
Innit?
You're Karen Kelly, Evie's sister, right? You're head of the student union.
It's not right.
She insisted.
You say innit?
But you are Karen Kelly, innit? How did you get here?
Bright lights in the sky, time machine, kidnapping, innit?
But how can anyone want to stay here with only your most basic needs provided for and with nothing to do all day?
Student life, innit?
Something stirred in my head. The words to a rubbish song mumbled by a mediocre guitarist and a worse singer. A nonsense word, really. Wonderball. And my peers sitting around muttering, surrounded by signs that had been provided by someone with a basic grasp of woodworking. What had they been protesting about? Or for? I hadn't paid any attention. I could only remember one thing. I sang, "You're my wonder ball. You're my wonder ball." The hairiest inmate was on his feet suddenly. He grabbed a sharp flint and rushed forward to hit me with it. But as I went to run away and I stopped singing, his fury diminished and he tossed his rock aside, sitting back in his first position. I changed tact, chanting, "Justice for X, freedom for Y." I was greeted by some muted repetition that lapsed into silence again. I could hear clunking from the monorail, the static and feedback of a speaker system. The 3 o'clock train was coming. Time was running out. Inspired, I grabbed the rock. "Guys, we can hit people with these." Karen Kelly looked up.
How do you mean?
By way of demonstration, I crunched some rotten wood.
Hard work, innit?
The professor scratched around in his groinal body hair alarmingly. But I'd lost them. They were watching the distant train. I tossed the flint away and settled into a mossy seat. I didn't know what to do, how to get out of there. A distant thud agitated the surface of the lake into ripples, and it was almost hypnotic. My hairy attacker sat beside me, offered me the flint back, and grunted some noises in my direction. With no clue what he meant and a wary eye on the monorail, I wondered if I was fast enough to outrun him, or the approaching train. Probably not.
His name's Ung.
The professor told me.
He wants you to break more stuff.
Why doesn't he speak for himself?
He's a caveman, innit?
Innit?
Lots of folk from different times. It's just an exhibition, innit?
The clinking of the train sounded like a chime of doom. Does he know I don't want to mate with him? Can you tell him?
Sure.
He said.
Ung, she has herpes.
I do not. The chance would be a fine thing.
Syphilis?
The professor asked.
I'm confused because, honestly, he can do a lot better.
It appeared I'd made a new friend. Ung seemed perfectly happy as he fetched the rock back for me, skipping over the professor's unconscious form to do so. As I took in the purple bruise flowering on his temple, I noticed 2 things. It had been one of my better throws, and I now had the attention of my peers. It was the first flicker of real human curiosity they'd shown, but it was too late. The mating train arrived above us.
Well, that chapter was certainly a rousing one. Did you see what I did there? Enjoy chapter 4.
The distant red shirt's voice came over the speakers.
Due to recent events, the human population in the park has outgrown its beautiful recreation of their natural habitat, so there'll be no mating today.
Some of the customers offered disappointed noises in response.
But don't worry, we have a special treat for you instead. Scientists have looked back at human history and learnt what they do when the living space becomes a priority.
A steady thud, thud, thud grew louder. The ripples in the lake and puddles surged up prominently, slinking back into deeper grooves. Dust shivered from the monorail in rainfall bursts. The spectators above were pointing out into the distance. The thudding echoed and rattled off everything. The river surged and lapped, grovelling at my heels as if urging me to run, and I was definitely that way inclined. Then I heard cheers from above. The pounding through the ground was almost lifting me off my feet. Even the others were starting to shuffle awkwardly around to look for its source. Guys! I didn't get any further because the dinosaur stepped over the ridge. It sized us up with its dead shark eyes and then roared at the sky. The professor sat up suddenly.
What have I told you about singing in my office, Ricky? Knock it off. Oh. Is that a female?
T-Rex!
Or a male?
T-Rex! This is what I'm talking about.
Karen Kelly fumed.
This sort of stereotypical portrayal is demeaning and dehumanising for dinosaurs. Neil, get me some cardboard and glue. We're going to...
I never did find out what she was going to do. The rest of us were quite terrified to stillness, but her sudden, uncharacteristic movement was the first sign of life in our little valley, and it was Karen's last. The T-Rex bit her in half, and when her legs spun by my head, I was adding to the movement by running for my life. Being distinctly unathletic is a double-edged sword. I would undeniably make a grisly and unappetizing meal, but I was quite easy to catch. Fortunately, even a slowly moving hors d'oeuvre is less appealing than any number of slouching manes. Neil was still rummaging in his pockets for the paste when the T-Rex got him, glue and all. The others were still protesting the inhumane representation of the inhumane when they were released back out as a mighty burp. By then I was halfway towards the support for the rail, closely followed by, and soon more distantly following, the professor. Apparently, had taken to me well enough that he kept pace with us. The last lingering protests were chewed over by the dinosaur before it turned our way. It moved with what looked like a lazy lope, but only looked because its lazy lope gobbled up ground like it was no more than a dopey student, and it casually hurtled straight towards us. Tugged my frayed sleeve, indicating my flint and the dinosaur thundering our way. I nodded, prepared to throw.
Use your bra!
The professor shouted. I shrugged it down my sleeve, mumbling that the elastic had been broken by a clumsy Neanderthal. Loading the stone into one cup, I stretched it out, straight towards history's greatest monster. It stared at me, and it ran right at me. With a feeble twang, I let it fly. Or flop. The rock landed halfway between me and the target, and was rapidly closer to the latter. And was off like a gazelle if it evolved to run upright. And I cried, "No!" He wouldn't make it. He had the flint in his hands when the jaws closed around him and lifted him into the heavens. The flint landed back at my feet. Maybe a heroic sacrifice, maybe luck, but I had to believe the former. The professor got it first.
Bra?
He demanded. I very reluctantly handed him my underwear. He loaded it up and spun it easily around his wrist. The dino, still licking its lips, snarled evil things at him, and he launched the stone, and it flew. It flew like it was designed for it. Our last chance arced so gracefully it was beautiful, and it took barely a fraction of a second to hit the T-Rex and hit it straight between the eyes.
Saul was a sissy.
The professor grinned. I did not grin. I did not grin because if you thought the T-Rex was angry before, then oh boy, do they not like having stones thrown at them. Its speed doubled along with its rage. The professor gave me my bra.
Split up, Roger. It's after you.
I wasn't very good at running before my unsupported boobs flounced around like they were learning semaphore, nor could I outpace the T-Rex even before the professor had turbocharged its fury. Neither could the professor, but he could outrun me. And he did. I made it as far as the first monorail support. As graceless and slow as I was, I made it. A second before the charging T-Rex did too, but I went around. Then, like the word of God erupting the universe from nothing and hearing the first sound unfurl across the vasty spaces of the cosmos as they themselves burst from nothing and explode their very being into a recurring, resonant echo that is still heard where nothing else exists and reports back as the glory of life, death and beyond, and then forms beings that in turn create doings that cry his glory into rolling space. That was how the post rattled when the dinosaur ran into it. Dazed somewhat, it squatted as well as it could, given its unhelpful shape, and it tried to blink its eyes back into their rightful sockets. Those enormous jaws, good God, they were big, really, really big, slammed around the upright. Missed me by inches. The whole railroad rumbled and shook. The dino lunged again as I skirted around frantically, keeping the crumbling, battered pillar between us. And it lunged and lunged again and howled as if someone had given it an oven mitt for Christmas. Jaws as big as a Vauxhall Cavalier snarled and slammed and gnashed, and its huge hide scoured and battered the concrete until there was nothing much between us, and I scrambled away from the snatching teeth for the last time, and rubble and evil rolled towards me, and the dinosaur growled and pounced, and a monorail landed on its head. It was followed by a string of carriages full of shrieking spectators, all suddenly rather closer to the action than they'd paid for, and the rest of the train tumbled off the rails, concertinaed with a mechanical bellow into a pile of scrap that was a poor crown for the king of dinosaurs, which was why he shrugged it off and stood and ignored the fleeing raptors, because it was looking for me, and I, stupidly, had not run away. The last wagon was shoved aside. Flipping on its side, without even that protection, I faced down the T-Rex, but not bravely, though I challenge you to do better. My knees were worse than the jelly they put in the pork pies, and everything above and below was seized by terror and could only quiver and shake and gibber nonsense and hope nobody would recognise me when I came back out of the dinosaur. The monorail wagon performed its last roll, crushing over and spilling the transporter at my feet. I smelt dinosaur breath. I won't describe it because it wouldn't be fair to those who contributed to it. And as the teeth closed around me, I scooped the machine to my chest. As I felt my clothes rip, saw tonsils loom in front of me, was squeezed by the first pressure of the bite, I hit recall. And the darkness was total as the jaws clamped closed.
We've made it to chapter 5, but did, what's her name?
But by then I was somewhere worse, far worse. Cold stone walls running with damp enclosed me. Gloomy grey light prodded weakly through a small barred window. With a shudder I heard the sound of a whip on flesh, and a voice I hadn't heard in what felt like forever said,
"Oh, hello, Riley. I didn't know you were back. Are you joining the class?"
And because Sister Sarsaparilla slapped her riding crop across the bare bottom of the only other student present, and because he was Sexton Lovecraft, I declined.